Okay, we're going live on YouTube.
I haven't seen you for a minute. Glad to have you.
Just so everyone knows, we're going live on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh, really?
No one's.
Sorry, what, Alan?
We're going live on YouTube.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
All right. Welcome to the February 2nd North Logan City Council meeting. Looks like we are all in attendance today. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance by Buzzy, after which I will say the prayer.
Audience, please rise and repeat after me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father in heaven, as we gather today as a council, we ask that thy blessing would be upon us as we consider the items on the agenda tonight, that we may do so in a fair and reasonable process. And please bless us as we make these decisions, that we may do so for the benefit of our citizens. And we ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, moved by Roger, seconded by Craig. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will move on to approving the, I believe, November 17 city council minutes. I would entertain a motion to accept those.
So moved.
Buzzy moves,
I second.
seconded by Emily. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Alan, do we have any follow-up on issues from our previous meetings?
Just the. I'll just go through these pretty quick.
Sure.
I'll just jump through, touch on a few items under each one. We'll talk about the city center and civic center shortly in the meeting. Retirement, recruitment, compensation, and a compensation committee. The interns right now are going through some of the wage comparisons and updating that table. Communication committee, we've started several things with social media, working with several different individuals throughout many departments. I think things are going well there, along with the website updates. Coming down through water, we're looking at several different funding opportunities. In fact, discussing things with the state legislature and also looking for funding through the USDA at this time. We'll talk a little bit more about water funding tonight as well in the budget. Sewer, we're looking at our funding for the major trunk line. That's the trunk line that goes from about 2,500 north all the way down through the city to near Gosner in Logan. And so we're going through that and looking at getting a new Vector truck for that department. Streets, obviously the heavy focus is on truck repairs and keeping things up for snow removal throughout these winter months, but they're also starting to plan. So they'll bring their budget shortly and they'll look at all the options for surface treatments and major projects in the coming months and get bids on those. Stormwater, they're doing a few things and they're looking at switching some of their software right now. We'll talk about that in the budget as well. But they're looking at switching to Compliance Go so they can better track all of the different stormwater items throughout the city that are required by the state. Engineering, he's working really hard on the Civic Center to get some of the geotech done here, along with the potential of piping a portion of the canal, a short portion of the canal along the property here. And then we're looking at our Meadowview designs, the Cash Recreation Complex near the pickleball courts, which includes a restroom and a pavilion in that area. And moving that forward as part of our RAPS project. We need to have the designs there and about to bid on that here shortly. Parks is heavily involved in that as well, along with the RAPS application for the north end of Elkridge Park. So two different applications, which is a pretty heavy request this year. But we think that we can take care of those items. Bonneville Shoreline Trail, we've had several meetings. We're talking with Carly from the county. She's going to go out and do the environmental portion of one of our grants that we received. And then we can probably move forward with portions of that above really the Wildercrest area and maybe some other portions of that along the bench. Recreation, they're very heavy into basketball right now, but also soccer signups. I think they cap soccer at 1,000. I think they're up to already like 600 or 700, if I'm not mistaken. 6
And
or
we have
7.
another month of till the deadline. Is that
Maybe not even that much. So if we're realistic, if we're already hitting 1,000, keep in mind that's probably 25 to 30% bigger than any other entity in the valley as far as soccer goes, which is incredible. Kind of a tribute to or a testament to the quality programs that Jesse and the staff are running. Facilities are doing major work here, obviously at the library, and also down at the RSL building for the next few weeks. Cemetery, we may have a meeting in the coming weeks. We're going to talk about the Veterans Monument and Memorial Day activities coming up, and also secondary water. Community development is very busy this week. They have a full agenda discussing a potential rezone or request for rezone by an individual near 18th or 2200 North and 6th East. I think that's where it's at. And also some discussions of some previous subdivisions that we've gone over. And they'll be working on the water conservation ordinance as well, along with that. Economic development, they are fine tuning the economic development master plan, but then we're looking at doing smaller focus sites for several areas throughout the city. The school district has our community reinvestment area proposed plan that's been gone through city council already. The treasurer, we'll go through a few items tonight relating to the treasurer's department, procurement and surplus properties. Going down through here, sorry, I'm just going to jump down through. We've done several things with human resources. Kind of mentioned a few of those in the compensation committee. They're working on those. Obviously, there's several budget updates tonight. Thanks to Scott for working on those. Then library, they dramatically increased library programs. You can see that in the newsletters. You look at that in a lot of their social media that they're putting out right now. And they're planning for their summer reading programs right now. Police, we worked together on the nuisance properties. They did hire the new officer, Michelle Clough. That was fantastic. I think they're near fully staffed, if maybe one or two crossing guards down, which is good.
cliffhanger like that?
With the fire department, they are going out for requests for proposals. They will be building their new station. They're on 2nd North, so that'll be exciting for the fire department there in Logan.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alan. We will move on to our recognition of an exemplary staff member. It's our pleasure to do that with Marie here. Today we will be, Marie was nominated by Karen, who says, Marie is an extremely hard worker, is willing to take on multiple responsibilities, and does an excellent job of conquering whatever task she is asked to do. She adds so much to the success of North Logan City, whether it's the newsletter, social media, PIO responsibilities, setting up and attending city council, planning commission meetings, taking minutes, or just listening as a friend to a coworker. Her laughter makes every day brighter. She's dedicated to family, friends, and work. She enjoys miniature toys, Snoopy, Wonder Woman, and a good calendar. Thanks, Marie, for just being you. Chief Black had to add to that. When I heard Marie's name nominated for recognition, I did not hesitate in seconding this nomination. Marie's positive personality and laughter is contagious to all those around her. Her work ethic is second to none, which speaks to her character and the role she plays in the success of North Logan City. Thank you, Marie, for everything you do, even the constant reminders that our monthly newsletter submission is due. I will add to that. It's a pleasure to work with Marie, and I know that you go above and beyond in your role with the city, and we really appreciate you. So let's give her a hand of applause. All right, with that, I believe we will move on to the business portion. Starting with a public hearing to receive public input on a proposed revision to the FY 2022 budget. Following the public hearing, approval of a resolution may be considered to adopt the proposed changes to the municipal budget. Alan, can you just kind of give us a background?
Yeah, I'll just give you a brief overview. Not much has changed since the last. There are a few other revisions that we'll discuss. The major things that were edited or updated. Economic development, we did discuss the potential for full-time in the future for economic development, which is a proposal in here. That's one of the major changes. But then as you go through all the other departments, the major discussions were centered on the administrative allocation that we talked about. Well, new council members that we discussed with the compensation committee this last fall. We went through several things, and one of the options was to discuss our administrative allocation, update that. It hasn't been updated in several years, and went through the percentages of how that would take place. And basically, a lot of our enterprise accounts put in a small portion into the administrative allocation, which pays for a lot of the time that the office staff, for example, like the treasurer, she deals with the vast majority of the utility billing and everything else that takes care of water and sewer. And so they pay a small allocation that goes into that. And that's what you see as the changes. They're all highlighted in that pink color to stand out as you go through here. I'm trying to think if there's any other major changes or anything that's substantial, other than just minor corrections at this time. And a lot of these are associated with some of the raises that took place a couple months ago. ARPA is something that we need to discuss in the coming months. And I think that Roger Anderson brought that up last month. We probably need to just come up with the plan in the next 2 to 3 months regarding this year. It was around 600,000 that has to be spent by the following year. However, if we don't expend it this year, it all takes place in 1 year, which bumps us into a different category with our audit, which is more expensive at that point if we exceed a certain threshold of 750,000 per year, if we exceed that from those funds. And so just one item to keep in mind as we go through that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else major. I think those are the main key points, and we'll touch on something in the RDA budget in the next agenda item.
Okay. Is there any discussion before we open it up to the public hearing? Okay, then we will open it up for a public hearing. Just a few brief instructions before you begin. State your name for the record, speak into the microphone so your comments can be recorded. Limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of those that are present, you may ask the chairman for more time. Phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. Address your comments to the council, not the public. The council may ask questions for them to better understand you. If you have questions or need to discuss an issue, please meet with the city council members or appropriate city staff before the public hearing. And you may provide a written statement in lieu of appearance at the hearing. Is there anyone who wants to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. And I would entertain the approval of a resolution or the adoption of a resolution to adopt these changes to the proposed budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution to adopt the proposed changes.
All
I'm
right.
sorry, I feel like I said a bunch of words.
That was good.
Okay.
So motion by Emily,
I'll make it second.
second by Joni. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. We'll move on to the second item. We will be convening as the redevelopment agency for a public hearing to receive public input on a proposed revision to the fiscal year 2022 budget. Following the public hearing, approval of a resolution may be considered to adopt proposed changes to the 2022 RDA budget.
Do we have to adjourn? Or do we just?
You don't adjourn, but you make a motion to
Okay.
move into redevelopment agency, and then after that, you need to adopt the
Okay.
agenda.
I move that we move to, what? I said that wrong. I move that we convene as a redevelopment agency.
Okay,
I second.
seconded by Emily. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will move into our RDA role. And then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this sub meeting.
I'll move it. We approve the agenda. for the
Okay,
redevelopment.
motion by Craig,
I'll second.
second by Joni. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Alan, give us background on this. I assume it's similar.
RDAs can be kind of confusing, especially since the state changes the acronym about every 5 to 10 years. And there's sub acronyms within here. You see like CDA, URA, other things. They're all portions or types of RDAs, which is now known as a CRA. But until that passes, or until we move to that point, you still function as the redevelopment agency. what these funds are certain areas after a lengthy study and approval process. They're economic development type areas. And what they are is they're called tax increment financing, and they're related to property taxes. So as we meet with the school district and with the county and us as the city, we discuss and we come up with a plan, and it's a lengthy process to approve this plan. And it's based off of the idea that a property, let's say it's an agricultural field or an area of blight in the city, kind of two completely separate things. But those two areas, if the development comes in on those properties, it's incentivized, it comes in, the increment or the change in tax value, a portion of that, depending on how the agreement is set up, comes back to the city. And those incentives are supposed to be used for specific items that help with development in the future. They help put in roads, they help put in portions of that, they help incentivize the business to come in and be successful, especially with the initial capital process of building. And so that's what these funds are in a nutshell. We get a certain portion for certain properties that have been developed that fall into these categories. And then they're used for improvements. So one example where these funds have gone in the last year, and they're down here, and that's why there's a change in the budget, because it kind of ran over into this year instead of being fully completed in last year, was the installation of the traffic light on 200 East, Wolfpack Way, and 2500 North, a very needed traffic light in that area, a safety concern. But within the RDA, when we set these things up, one of the things that was supposed to happen with those funds was the implementation and the installation of Wolfpack Way, along with all of the different intersections throughout there. And so this luckily fell into that category. So we were able to use those RDA monies that were saved up over time to put in that traffic light.
Okay,
And
great.
so that's one of the major changes in here. And the only other changes are the administrative allocation.
Okay, any discussion before we open it up for a public hearing? Okay, with that, we will open the public hearing for public input on a proposed revision to the RDA 2022 budget. If anyone has any comments, the previous instructions that I read apply.
Hi, Dave Flandro, resident here in North Logan. I'm trying to get my arms around all this process and understanding budgets and so forth. The question I have is perhaps more fundamental, and that is with the water situation that we're currently experiencing and have been, are any of these RDA funds and the way the money is being allocated to anticipate some future development needs to handle either more or less water concerns for our budget? It seems to me we're going to have less water, and as a result, we would probably need to be utilizing some funding for storage and other things which many of the developments are depending on, but we haven't received yet. So just a question I have.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Flandro. All right, seeing no other comments, I will close the public hearing and open up for discussion amongst the council. Alan, I mean, can you address that? I know that we are discussing water funding. It's on the forefront right now, but.
Extremely good question right there. And it's very valid, because a lot of these funds, when Wolfpack Way went in, they were used to put in a lot of the water lines. Not only that, but also upsize the water lines to increase or provide the flow to several areas in a commercial sector. And so when you have a commercial sector, your pipes aren't just 8 inches throughout that area. They're usually like a 10 or 12, and you have a larger pipe size to handle the flows throughout that area. One of the shortfalls, though, and it doesn't have the foresight that Mr. Flandro brought up, is that it can't be used for things like storage or the actual source funding to get us water, which is really what we're in dire need of right now. However, it can be used to increase the size or the flow or the capacity, within the specific area that's outlined within the RDA for that specific area and time. These things only last about 10 or 15 years, and then we have to renew or come up with a new area, which is what we're trying to do right now. A very good question, seems logical. Unfortunately, a portion of it can't be used for that.
Okay,
It's very specific what we can and can't use these funds for.
okay. Any other discussion from the council?
I move,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I move that we approve the resolution to adopt the proposed changes to the fiscal year 2022 RDA budget.
Okay, motion by Buzzy,
Second.
second by Roger. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. So now we will close. Do we need to motion to close the RDA?
Yes, close and then move into its regular sessions.
We have to move two motions.
Gosh.
I think it's all one.
Okay. So can I get a combo motion?
I'll
from
move that
someone?
we close our session as the RDA and move back into our normal city council.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Craig, second by Buzzy, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. We'll move on to our third agenda item. Consider modifications to the North Logan Industrial Subdivision specifically related to proposed improvements to the 400 West roadway and the associated underground utility improvements. Spencer, you'll speak to this one.
I can, and Alan can probably step in for some of it as well. So this is regarding a subdivision that was approved some time ago in development plan by the Planning Commission City Council. It's these four lots here that you can see a bit. Alan circling them there. And that's the North Logan Industrial Subdivision. On the west side, thank you, I had a brain freeze there. West side of that subdivision is 400 West. It's the alignment of 400 West. As you can see in the yellow lines there on the plat, we currently have it tailing off and curving. This is for the alignment further to the south, which is why it's making that curve. There are some questions. However, because it curves off of that parcel and onto the property to the east, in the development of the subdivision, we kind of ran into a roadblock of, okay, well, how far do we construct the road? Do we construct the road to a certain point and then just pay the rest of the money? Because the landowner to the west is not interested in constructing the road at this time. Or do we look to straighten that out and curve the road a little bit further south than it's originally shown? So we had a development agreement that included this. This is the primary issue. There are a couple other things in there that were addressed, just kind of standard development of roads before you get a building permit sort of questions. And really, we wanted to come to you with those two options as a city council. If we would prefer to straighten up that alignment of 400 West and push that curve essentially down further to the south, which has pros and cons, or take an escrow amount for that road for the city to keep and hold on to until that road's constructed. Now, the pros and cons of both of these, if I had to pick one, I think staff would rather lean towards straightening out the road. I don't know if the staff is even all the way in agreement, but the main reason for that is anytime you take money into escrow, timing, if that road goes in 10 years, it's not likely we're going to have enough money in escrow to cover that. And so it gets a little tricky there. Also, it is usually better if it just gets built all at the same time. And the developer is willing and able to build that right now. And that's actually the option they prefer as well. It's this option 1, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, option 1. And that's the one the developer prefers, is just straightening out the road, building it all now, as opposed to that escrow option. The downside to straightening it out is obviously the curve gets pushed further south, and the property owner to the south now has half of a road for a stretch of their property before it curves off. Whereas before the road was completely on the west parcel. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Alan can chip in there if I missed anything.
No, it's just essentially this portion right here is the question mark. Do they in their development agreement just start curving right here and then just end? Which kind of limits what portion of what they can do with their development. Or do we have them carry this and then pay us for the portion in the future and we do the work, hoping that inflation hasn't hit or that the construction costs haven't skyrocketed at that point? Hopefully there's a trend downward at some point.
Ooh.
Or do they come in and just do their proportional share right now, the 19.5 feet, and carry this road and terminate it right here on the end? And that means they put it all in right now, but then the alignment is slightly further to the south and it clips another property in the future. So
And that's the 11, the property ending with the 011 that it'll clip.
yes, just it would clip the corner of 011 as it comes out, and then the alignment comes straight down through here.
Yeah, and it curves that way to miss, obviously, this development here. There is one structure that is in the way of that alignment. We did meet with property owners it was in 2019. We met with them several times and got that road realigned. And there was no good option essentially. And we went with the least worst, the least bad. And we've talked with property owners, all the ones affected in this, both the property owner on the west, obviously the Jenks with that subdivision as well, and that 0011.
And
Lance
what
reached out to.
what have you learned from that property owner? Would they be?
Right here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know,
because
they're-
that's the biggest change in my mind.
Right, and they're not in favor of that changing, obviously. The tough thing to consider is just all property owners and how they're affected. So the owner here, HA Fab, also owns down here as well. And so the road's curving to miss that. Essentially, the same owner owns both of these parcels too.
Oh,
And so on one hand, you have this owner that thinks it should curve as close as possible to this building while keeping in the standards, so that they don't have to have a whole road on their side for the whole time, because they're gonna have to have the whole road all the way the length of that parcel already.
mhm.
Whereas this parcel is going from having no road on it to having about a half road, and it'll go away about right there.
Oh, okay.
So the impact relative is less. This again is a case of there's not really a great option. The road brings a lot of benefit to the area, but obviously nobody wants to see it take up their land. So it's tough on all accounts.
I
Okay.
have two questions. So is the big picture at the end of the day that we want that road to connect to 2500 North?
Yes, so that will
Okay.
connect to 2500 North and beyond.
That's on
So
the
that-
development plan.
Yeah, that
Okay.
alignment will go all the way down through Logan. 400 will have a light at 2500 North in the future, and will go all the way north in and beyond Smithfield. So it'll be a very much regionally significant roadway in the future. It's just making sure we get the pieces lined up so we don't create a roadblock and mess that up as things develop.
Okay, and do you know what they're planning to do with those 4 parcels?
Yes, so those are in our industrial zone, and they're planning on building just one building per parcel with parking and drainage and all of the associated things there, one at a time, and basically leasing them or selling them outright, just depending on who they find to there. If you look just a little bit north, you can see very similar buildings, even just go a little further north of that. Those buildings were all done by the same person who's working on that subdivision, and it'll be the same sort of thing. And this is our industrial zone, so it's the perfect place for it.
Minus the road?
Right, the road, it gets in the way. It'll be a huge benefit to everybody, but it also there.
We're
it
gonna
comes
step
with
on some toes
some land, yeah.
inevitably.
Mhm.
Did you have 2 questions?
He answered them.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I too favor, just because of what I've seen, I favor bird in the hand, kind of, that if we have a developer willing to put in the road, that's pretty hard to turn down. I'm sympathetic to the landowners affected to the south, I think. But I favor getting the road in to that point.
Yeah,
I don't like putting an escrow. I just, I don't know. That seems risky and I'd much, especially if they're in favor of doing it. I agree with you, Lindsay.
I think just for point of clarity there, back on the map, Alan. So what
sorry.
you're saying is this the least impactful solution to all of the property owners is to have the developer complete the road and then curve it near the end? That's kind of what I'm hearing from you guys, Spencer, is that no matter what we do, one piece of land is affected, but this one might be the least.
You know, the amount of ground that's going to be taken up by a
Yeah, more
road
shared would be
is
an
going to be
understatement,
equal
yeah.
either way. But in this case, from this point on, if we go with the alignment as is, 100% of that ground will come out of this owner's land. If we shift that curve down, most of it still comes out of this owner's land, but
The burden gets shared a little bit.
chunk from about there comes out of that.
Gotcha.
So at the end of the day, the same amount of land is coming out. I don't think it's a tremendous amount less burden on the property owners to the west, but it's not insignificant. It's about an acre, a little more. And it's not necessarily a tremendous amount more burden on the one to the east either.
It's like Craig said, we're
So it
just
doesn't
sharing the
solve
burden.
anything
Okay.
necessarily.
I
but-
like the idea though of them sharing a little bit more. I mean, the
Yeah.
guy to the, I'm sorry, I can't remember west, east is going to be using that road, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So are we taking action on this tonight potentially?
The only thing you could take action on is just this development agreement and the modifications here to the already existing development that took place. And it would be whether you select option 1 or option 2. And that's about it. Just the other associated edits with this development agreement. Because if this is approved and if you do select option 1, the developer would have to come back in and do, Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, but a plat amendment at that point.
Yes, so it's platted with the road alignment as shown. So they will have to come back in for a plat amendment. I believe that only comes into city council. It may also have to go to planning commission. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and review the code. But they will have to do a plat amendment.
Mhm.
Okay. So we would potentially be modifying this agreement tonight and choosing one of those options.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's it.
So I would entertain a motion on this. I believe we're kind of in agreement on this.
I
Emily,
move
you seem
that
like you're ready.
we-
Oh, Joni.
got it.
Go,
Joni's
Joni's
got
got
it.
it. I was trying to figure out how to phrase it.
I move that we approve option 1 for the preferred option. Is
Okay.
there anything else I need to
That we
add?
And the development
modify.
agreement.
Modifying the
Modify the-
development agreement.
That we
Okay.
modify the development agreement.
Okay, motion by Joni,
Second.
second by Emily. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Thank you, Spencer. You're gonna stick around for this next one? Okay, we will move on to consider modifying the North Logan City Code Title 12 Land Use, modifying the requirements for access and ingress egress for the new subdivisions.
All right. So this ordinance, just to give a little bit of background, we have this standard written also in our design standards technical manual, and we have for some time now. With previous development in the city, there have been instances where one ingress egress point kind of gets stretched out for a long ways. Up on the bench is the main example, and just gets stretched further and further and further until at some point it becomes a connectivity issue, a response time issue, and it's just not a safe, good way to plan a city. So because of that, in our design standards manual back in, I believe it was 2015 or 16, Alan was around here. I wasn't at that time. They implemented a couple different things to stop that from happening in the future. One of those was limiting a dead end road or one point of ingress egress road to 30 homes or less. The other one was implementing a 750-foot length maximum requirement. So that's in our design standards manual, but we don't have language in our code to back that up. And in looking at that code, we wanted to clarify and especially specify where that measurement would be taken. One possibility that arose was, say you go 750 feet Then you add another 750 feet kind of coming off the top of it, and you just have a line of 750 feet roads that meet that 750 feet requirement, but not the real intent of the code. So we wanted to just clarify it. So it was a little more simple, easy to read, and put it in our city code along with our design standards where most of our other subdivision requirements are. Just to be clear, this is not applicable to existing development. This is in our subdivision ordinance, subdivision section of our code, and would only apply to new subdivisions going forward. So I'll step you through some of the changes since we've last. So there are a couple things that I'd want to talk through with the city council. Also just talking through some of the changes. One of those being the language has been all adjusted a little bit. Seth, the city attorney, was able to take a look at it and helped reformat my ramblings into something that's more comprehensive, I think. So it's been kind of reworded, but it's all getting at the same thing. There's still two options here for point number 3, and that one got auto-corrected to 4. But there are two options for paragraph number 3. And one of those is measuring from a certain distance along a collector road. That was not the preferred option. I left that in there just so if there was more discussion on that, we could. The preferred option from the Planning Commission and I think from the City Council last time we talked was just specifying where the 750 feet would be measured from. And that has been written in here as it has to be measured from the intersection of a road that has 2 points of ingress and egress. So no more than 700 linear feet from the nearest intersection of a road that does have 2 points of ingress and egress. So he wrote that a little more succinctly for me. So I wanted to get feedback on if we still want to go with that option for paragraph 3. And then the other one I think is still up there. If you want to scroll up, Alan. It's the 750 feet. There was some discussion in Planning Commission about adding a caveat to that 750 and saying you can go up to 1,000 if it's along a master plan road and the dead end is temporary. From what we heard in Planning Commission, that was not something that they were interested in. They recommended this ordinance on without that little addition of giving an extra 250 feet if it's along a master plan road. But I wanted to bring that up again, and it looks like I don't have that language in here from Seth's language, but we could modify that to add it back in if the city council desired. I just wanted to make sure the council had a time to discuss it. That would essentially help us build out a little bit more of our master plan roads and maybe help out a few developments, make them a little more feasible in some cases if they're along a master plan road. So those are the two kind of things we still need to make sure we have pinned down before we get it approved.
I think that is in the document that we have in front of us, though, in the
Okay.
folder, right?
Alan,
If
do
you
you have
scroll up
the-
a little
Yeah, there's
bit.
probably one in there.
Just the Google Doc, I think.
Right
No,
here.
that's the public hearing. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
In the purple, right?
Yes. So I've got that struck through, but yeah, so the language essentially just states that 750 can go up to 1,000 if it's along a master plan road and if the dead end is temporary. So those two conditions being met, you get an extra 250 feet.
Okay, so my understanding is that we're clarifying the definition of ingress egress, because that's really the genesis of all this, right?
Right.
We encountered this, it's an existing code, but we encountered a situation where we realized it's ambiguous, what qualifies as ingress egress. So we're not
Right.
imposing a new 750 foot limit on 30 homes or more.
No, we've enforced this since that design standards technical
15,
manual.
16.
Yeah, it's and yeah, Alan would have to specify that date a little closer, but yeah, it's been enforced for a while.
So
Okay.
we haven't approved any homes, 1, 2, 3 homes at greater than 750 feet since 2015. Is that right? 2016?
Probably before then, several years. I don't know when it started, but before then it was more of a city block. So instead of relying on fire code of 750, they relied on a 660 measurement, which is one city block. And that was the rule for a permanent or a temporary dead end. But the further you go back, the more kind of loosely it was interpreted
Okay,
over
that's fair.
time.
I think just a couple comments. First of all, I was mentioning this to the mayor, I've very much supported the 1,000 feet exception on a temporary dead end. I personally would like to see that re-added back in. Don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I like
Okay,
that
the problem I
flexibility.
think is the word temporary makes it sound like it's going to be a short amount of time and it could be 20 years. And so in my mind, temporary, I just think that if there isn't the ingress, like if there isn't the idea that the road is going to be completed within a year or something, the word temporary is just ridiculous.
I think that's true where there's only that exception, but there's an and there.
Yeah, there's an
That
and
it's
clause.
temporary and part of the master plan. So that's an inevitability. And I think the reason that changes it is because it's in the city's interest to get as much of those master plan roads built. And so, kind of similar to what we were talking about in the previous item, we want to build those roads now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I look at it as a bit of a trade-off. I mean, I can see what you're saying. I think there's a benefit to the
I
city.
just think
that's-
temporary though doesn't mean temporary in this code because there are people who are like, oh yeah, it's on a master plan road, but like, I mean, when is that road going to be built? I don't love the idea of putting in something that in my mind, no reasonable person would consider temporary. And would a reasonable person consider 10 years for a master plan road be temporary?
Well, I think
I don't know.
but one of the point of ingress is already on a master plan road, right?
Yeah, I
So
guess
that's kind of where
true.
if
Okay.
that helps us on the backside of that, eventually I can see some benefit for 250 feet. But I mean, could go either way on it. I just hope
No,
for the person that'd be a good-
you're making really good points. I guess I'm just coming from the person who's like,
Did you ever take debate? Emily, in
yeah,
high school?
I did.
I'm just kidding.
Don't concede that there are good points made then.
Okay,
I'm just
well,
kidding.
I want to
No,
work with you
I
guys.
would love to hear, everyone's, where everyone is on this. Roger, Craig.
I really like where it is.
Don't-
I don't want to put back in the temporary thing. That's
Okay.
where I am.
I like it just as far as we're following fire code. So there's no gray area. It's 750. There's not a city block, which could be interpreted as 500 feet. So it gets us more current on that. Maybe there's another word we can use other than temporary to help.
And just
There's
to
a
clarify
feasibility.
that temporary line is essentially, this is granting. So it's not saying if it's temporary, you can go as far as you want. It's only granting 250 more feet and that 30 home limit is also unchanged. So take Smiling H subdivision was recently approved. That one, the first time it got to city council, went back to the drawing board because they had more than 30. Whether or not there was a master plan road, they were on it, they had a temporary turnaround, that still wouldn't have been approved. So there's still, it's not, even that added little 250 feet isn't going to make a tremendous difference as far as concerned, but yeah, I mean, it is just a decision the council can make.
We all stare at Craig when the word fire gets.
I know you
thrown
do.
out there.
Yeah,
Does
that's
it
the
make a
word.
No
difference?
pressure.
Yeah.
Craig,
The-
does it make a difference so for your trucks if you've had that extra 250 feet?
No, not really. The word I think instead of temporary is future connectivity. And if it's a planned master road, you know it's going to go in and you know it's going to get put in that location. It's a future connectivity.
I love that word. Can I?
It's gonna go there.
Well,
It's just
Craig,
no matter when.
would you be okay with 1,000 feet? I mean,
We have subdivisions that go in all the time with stubs for future connectivity.
Mhm.
And we allow them. I prefer the 750 feet because that's less hose and everything that we have to lay out. But in this case, the hose issue isn't the big issue because they're going to be running fire hydrants into these subdivisions anyway.
Okay.
And so it's just how long we want that bottleneck. Because when you're talking about one means of egress in and out of a subdivision, if anything happens at home number 1 or 2 or 3 or 5, if something happens there, that road is blocked off. And anybody downstream from that road, you have to realize you have built a situation. Nobody goes to school that day. Nobody goes to work. Nobody goes to anywhere. Because when we have an emergency and we block that road off, you're done. So how many homes do you want to run the risk that if there's a water line break or something, nobody's going anywhere for that day? That's what you have to balance into this is how many homes do you want to run that risk with and how far out do you want to run that risk? then nobody's going to move that day because of an incident.
Chief Hannick, do you have any additions to that?
Right. It's when.
The problem is the longer you make the road, the more homes you're going to be able to build on it, right? And to Craig's point, our concern is one way in, one way out is always problematic for emergency services. We have stations strategically placed throughout the area to come from multiple directions. Because if one road, gets damaged, blocked off, it limits our ability to be able to get to those homes. That's my concern. So the longer we do that, do we continue to go 750, and it leads us into some developments we already have in North Logan and some other cities? Because that's the issue, right? We think it's going to connect somewhere because there's some master plan that's going to happen, but then we continue. Pretty soon we don't have 750, we have 1500, and then we have, it goes on and on. So it leads to that issue. But again, it is your decision. I'm just providing a little insight, but I do agree with
Sooner
what
or
Craig's
later, you
saying.
got to draw the line. And unfortunately, that line is going to be a few feet short for one owner and a few feet longer for the next.
Yeah.
Theoretically, how many homes could we add for our zoning at 250 more feet of linear footage? Do you know off the top of your head? What's our? No. So if we had 250 more linear feet along a road, how many homes theoretically could you add to that 250 feet?
Yeah, it depends on the zone.
Yeah. So let's use our RE1, where I think a lot of these would probably.
Yeah.
Is a 9 foot.
So you could do 918.
90-foot frontage.
So 4 homes roughly, 2 on each side.
Thanks.
So
RE1 is a 90 foot if done density determinant. So that would be about.
Am I getting
Two.
2 on each
It's a
side?
little over
So
two.
4.
Yeah. If you go into R110, you've got 80.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, you'd be 6 more. So if they didn't get the 30 up to that 750 point, you would be adding 6 more. So if they're at 20, then they go another 250 feet, they could go up another 6 homes, another
I-
4, 5, 6 homes.
And I think to Chief Hennick's point, we actually, the way this is written, we couldn't add on to that after that. We'd
That's
be at a
what I was saying,
maximum.
like you
That's the
couldn't
whole
do
point of the-
multiple
yeah.
That's what
750s.
this
Yeah.
is trying to fix.
Yeah, we're trying
Yeah.
to make sure they don't ladder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have enough from 2 fire experts to change my opinion. So, I mean, if you guys both are in agreement that that's not the wisest choice, then I drop my comment about keeping the 1,000 in.
I support our first responders.
Yeah, it sounds like we can kind of resolve that. We'll leave it out. Let's just kind of continue with the more conservative approach with this. We'll focus on kind of the modifications below. And, we can revisit this if there are situations that present themselves that, would change our minds. I know that I've received a lot of community input. I think it'd be great to hear if anyone wants to speak to this. Now's a great time.
Yeah.
Again, just state your name and we'll hold you to the 2-minute limit.
I'm Micah Thornley. We are a resident 1792 East on Cottonwood Lane. We had considered trying to extend up 2600 north, but that wasn't an option with these codes. But we sent an email, so I'll just read it for the record, but we were writing to voice our concern concerning the city council's possible vote tonight on ordinance 22 that will adopt Title 12 in the city's land use ordinance. We just kind of found out about this personally, so if I'm misinformed about anything, I apologize. But we've had these, again, discussions with the city at length about going beyond 750 feet, up 2,600. But we recognize the city's desire, not wanting to prevent other subdivisions to have access problems. But also we kind of feel like by creating this limitation where you would need second access, you could limit your ability to extend into further areas without larger landowners getting together and developing larger parcels of land. And so we feel the city, we think it'd be unwise to vote on this unless there was a way or maybe a consideration where for landowners that are kind of locked deeper in and not, but if they wanted to develop or subdivide 1 or 2 lots for family members to be able to, as long as they're meeting those safety requirements, is that a possibility? We're not talking 30 homes here. We're just talking about adding a few lots for family members. Thank you.
Which parcel is yours?
Thank you, Mr. Thornley.
12. Yeah. This parcel. Our hope was to be up.
And Spencer, can you speak to that? Because my understanding is that this gets triggered at that 30 home mark. That the 750, like this wouldn't be a material change to what the Thornleys have encountered. That we have the 750 and have for 5 or 6 or 7 years now.
Right, and I've worked with and chatted with the Thornleys in the past, and they are kind of stuck. Craig mentioned where that line's drawn. 750 is going to be all right for some people, just off the mark for others. That theirs is a classic case of that, where right 750 goes up about right here, I think, if I remember right, somewhere around there. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just going off of memory here. And that is along the master plan road. So if you're about right here, and they had another 250 feet, that get them maybe up to here. But it's unfortunately that's where it's measured from, is that.
And that's true, even though they're under the 30 home
yes
mark.
So
Okay.
it's, you can't go over 30 homes and you can't go over 750. It's both of those.
Okay, it's both
So-
parameters.
Yeah, in this case, if that exception was left in, that 1,000, they could go another 250 as long as there was a dead end. I know that that doesn't seem to be the way the council is leaning, and it wasn't the way the planning commission leaned. But that would get them a little bit further. But and really kind of the tough thing about it is you write a code to avoid issues, but that line's always going to be drawn at kind of a wrong time. And you can't have it be subjective on, okay, this one won't be too much of an issue because it's 1 or 2 homes, but this one will be. We have to apply that code kind of evenly.
If
which
we
is tough.
don't do anything tonight, is that 750 still a limitation?
Yes, it's still a limitation. This doesn't change. It doesn't make it more restrictive.
But we're seeing an example of where the 750 is realistically inadequate.
Right. So yeah, and if that 1,000-foot stipulation was added in, that would give them another 250 feet. I still don't think that would quite get to where they would want to be.
In this particular case too, just to add that in, and the way the code's written, and Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong right now, like a road like 2,700 or 2,500 north would not be eligible, but 26 would, because it is one of our master plan roads.
Right.
Similarly, 2,000 east, they'll come through here and connect into this location at Wheel Drive at 1,800. That's a master planned road. And so on certain roads, that's what you would be considering.
Okay.
Correct.
Spencer, could they consider doing a circular drive that loops them up and gets them where they want to be and then brings it back down?
Irregardless of length, you need an approved fire turnaround, which is either a cul-de-sac of a certain radius, and Craig and Chief know all these as well, or they're hammerhead turnarounds. Those are all outlined in our design standards and in the International Fire Code. So that's a given, but that wouldn't affect the length. It would be 750 regardless. And then I think there's, after a certain point, they've got to have a turnaround no matter what.
Yeah, that's at 150 feet. They have to do the turnaround.
Right.
So they need the property to the east of them to develop with them to get a road in there for them to put this home there then?
Right. So if there were a connection to the south, a connection to the north, if there were some other access point, wherever that would be, or if it went through further to the east and connected up, just if there was more than one point of ingress egress, that's when you could go further than the 750.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Do we have more? Go ahead and come up.
I just had a follow-up question about 2,500 and 2,700. is 2,500, like if you were to create a second access, is my understanding that road is not up for widening? Is that even a road that could be considered a second access?
Yeah.
And same with 2,700, that's kind of not really a standard road. So if you
So those would
access
have
to
to-
2,700, are either of those roads up to their
Adequate.
code?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that outlines a good point about this code as well. So the other stipulation of this code is that in order for something to be counted as an access, it has to basically be constructed. It can't be a future planned road, and it has to be built to at least the minimum in our design standards technical manual. So you
And
may
that's,
want-
what's that width?
Our design, it depends on a few different things, the
Okay.
length, the turnaround, but it could be either 20 or 26 feet.
Okay.
So that would potentially come into play on either or both of those, where the width of that road would need to be looked at and approved or modified in some way in order to count as a second access.
Could the road go from 2,600 north up to 27 through their property and help them meet that ingress egress, and then they could?
What
do
they're
a-
saying is that 2,700 isn't wide enough to
27th
qualify.
and 25th would both need improvements in order
Oh,
to
I'm
count.
so sorry.
Right.
But I think this is a
Oh.
perfect example of why I'm struggling with this code.
Right.
Because usually we visit stuff like this and we say, well, you knew the conditions when you brought your property. But we are going to affect many people that are in this situation. This is just one of, I mean, you can look through this entire East Bench where we're going to have problems with people that own land already, where this wasn't something that was in place before. And going back to when we actually did put this in, I still don't even remember the 750 foot. It was 30 homes, right? Because that's what we were concerned about. That was the magic number that got talked about every week was
Well,
30
there's-
homes.
There's a portion of the fire code that we adopted that included.
But I don't think we ever
750.
discussed it, right? I think it was probably in there. And then at the time, the commission was just talking about, we think 30 homes is too
Yeah.
many. Anything under that, we think we can manage.
The spirit
So-
and the intent of what the issue was at that time was
Yeah.
the, I don't know if you're familiar with. this
Yeah, I happen to know
subdivision
that
right
one.
here.
Yeah.
Um,
So if,
I just,
Was
Not to mention the
Wildercrest.
I feel like
15%
though,
grade. There's
okay,
also-
so let's say we leave it as it is and we leave that 1,000 feet, that still doesn't get them to the point that they want. Okay, so I do agree with Craig, like I think we should draw a line because I think we're never gonna find the perfect number that's gonna make everything work.
if we go to 1,000, you're gonna show me 5 more properties at 1,200.
Yeah,
And then you're gonna
exactly.
show me 5 more properties at 1,500.
And I would venture many of those were purchased before 2015, before
All
there
of
was
them.
anything on the
And
books.
Buzzy, to your
right?
point, I guess my concern is that I am entirely sympathetic to landlocked landowners. However, I think you have to also consider what we run the risk of on the other end of things. Like if we say, you know what, in some instances, an 11-foot wide road is okay. How do you say to Canyon Gates, not for you? Like how do you apply a consistent code there?
Yeah, I think that's where my mind's going. Is there a better formula that we're not thinking through? And there might not be, but is an 11-foot road okay if it's a maximum of 2 homes? Is it have to be a full-size road if it's 30 homes? Do you see what I'm saying? We're getting really caught between.
I need to
Yeah.
go back to my comment to you a minute ago. You need to come down to the fire station,
Drive the
go for a
truck.
ride with me in that BRT, which is the big red truck. I'll even let you drive it.
If I can drive the back
Well,
part
I
like
don't know
on
about the
Seinfeld.
chief,
He
You
would.
get- When you get in those trucks and you try to
Mhm.
navigate these roads, especially under an emergency situation where you're trying to hurry to get assistance to people, that is difficult. And you're putting us in a difficult situation the longer you go out there.
And I think you're saying, whether you're accessing a 30-home subdivision, you're always accessing one home
Yeah,
that
right,
needs
yeah,
emergency
right,
care. So it's
right.
not really necessarily contingent on
And the more homes you
Number.
get, the higher
likelihood.
chances there are,
Yeah.
or likelihood they're gonna need an ambulance in there when we've already blocked off a road somewhere else. And those
So-
are the risks that you're dealing with.
So Craig, so Bob Strebels reached out to us on 2700 North. So if I'm hearing you right, this scenario is a safety issue that shouldn't be allowed in the future.
Sure.
Okay.
It's a
Um,
narrow road and I've driven fire trucks up that road before. I've even plowed that road before. A long time ago in a plow truck,
I think
at Bob's request. He doesn't remember it.
Go
But
ahead, chief.
I got
Can I
it.
add one more thought to
Yeah.
this? As we consider developments, especially one-way access developments, especially on our east bench. I mean, if we think about our wildland risk and risk of fire spread from those areas, it's not just the one house that could potentially be on fire. But if it is the access point is the threat, how do those 30 homes, now you added another 9 or 6 homes to that, at what point do you say, all right, this is worth it? We already have a very dangerous situation in one part of the city he just pointed out. We know that's a problem. And I know that that's the extreme, but those are the things you start to create by making exceptions.
And let me give a perfect example. I do fire investigations. I was just over in Colorado. I went from Colorado Springs up to Greeley. Right along that road in Boulder, there was a fire that burned 1,000 homes. I drove through there. It wasn't in a wooded area. It didn't have tall pine trees. It had nothing different than what it looks exactly like in one of these subdivisions. Exactly. And it burned 1,000 homes. Those people ran for their lives. If we have something like this and you have a single access, you're going to have that road plugged up and people aren't going to get out. Fortunately, I think they had 1 death or 2 deaths.
They had a similar in Ashland, Oregon, summer before last, 3,000 homes. And it started in a field
And these aren't in
next
wooded
to an
areas
apartment
like in
complex. And it's not
California.
wooded areas. These aren't forests. It isn't Paradise, California. It's just,
And it spread so.
but it
fast.
spread so fast. And so we sometimes think that can't happen to us. I think it's important to realize that's why fire code is there. A lot of these insurance companies are looking at being even more strict with the code and because of the insurance companies are going bankrupt because of these mass, conflagrations that are happening. So I would just caution. I mean, I'm not taking sides here, but I do think it's important that we point those things out.
Okay, and I think that's the difficulty, right, of a council to say, we have this specific situation that are just clearly troublesome, but you also were charged with saying what's our responsibility to citizens as a whole when we're making broad level decisions like this. Do we have anyone else that wants to speak today on this? Okay, any other comments from the commission or the council?
I have a friend that lost their home in the Colorado fire. And we talked specifically about a certain area here in town. And
Can we not name
We
it?
can just say
You can
Wilder
say
Crest.
Wilder.
it's
Okay.
fine.
Is
that
it-
area.
Is it a bad word?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
So,
Excuse me?
and I'm also from the area in Oregon where the fires happen. And so I love that we have first responders, and my applaud is to you, and I want to keep you safe and I want to keep people safe. So I want to follow safe guidelines. And I'm so sorry that this hurts people. I have property too that I won't be able to, I'll have to be very careful about what I get to do with it. So
I think to be clear on this point too, though, we're really just defining what does ingress egress mean. That's the crux of what we're discussing today and what we've discussed for the past 4 months. Really, we haven't even explored the 750. We haven't even gotten there because that's always kind of referenced back to fire code. So really, what we're discussing today are those paragraphs to say, what does ingress egress mean? And is there a concrete standard that we can apply so that whenever someone comes in, we're not saying, well, it meant this in that situation and it means this now. So on the table today is, do we adopt that? And if you wouldn't mind, Alan, just flipping back to that code.
Do you want which one do you want? Do you want the?
The one that we're approving, the
The green, blue, green, orange,
uh,
the
just
multicolored
yellow
It's
one.
this
Or the
one?
multicolor?
Oh,
Which
it's this
one?
one.
Just
Yeah,
the
it's this
yellow
one,
one.
sorry.
Yeah.
Just yellow. That's the one I was like.
So we have those two options, the number 3 and number 4 to choose from. I think that the number 4 has been far more vetted. I think we've identified the issues with the number 3. So with the council's confirmation, I think we're only discussing the option 4. Is
Yeah,
that
which
right?
is the alternate option 3, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
I want to make sure I'm getting it right.
So where is everyone on that? Are we comfortable making a motion to adopt this tonight?
I am, but I don't know if anybody else is.
I'm comfortable.
So really, we're defining where you measure from.
Yeah, the ingress, the 750 is something that could
We
be
can
discussed
work
at a
on that
later
more,
date,
sure.
but this is to say, what does ingress egress mean? Go ahead and make a motion, Emily, and if
Okay.
it doesn't carry, then we'll continue the discussion.
All right. I motion to approve option 2 of the 3. Gosh, this is
you'd
so hard to say these
option
right.
4,
Option 4, okay, of the modification for the requirements of access, ingress, egress for new subdivisions.
Okay, motion by Emily. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Roger.
And so we're, just to be clear, we're approving all the sub
Yes.
areas under that as well.
Yeah, so
We're approving the whole ordinance with paragraph 4, striking paragraph
Striking
3.
right.
Gotcha.
Right, that is the motion on the table. I will call for a vote and we'll see where this goes. All in favor?
I,
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so everyone in favor except for Buzzy. And that motion carries.
One thing to just add in this discussion, and the mayor, you just touched base on this in discussions with the city attorney, and this is over time. This doesn't help in the immediate needs. I realize that over time in discussion, as these roads become more developed and as our water system becomes more developed on top of it, a lot of the system naturally goes away. But I think this needs to be brought up at a future date, meaning in the next year or two. This probably needs to come back before the city council to see how it's working now and see if any modifications need to take place, would just be my recommendation. To the
I like
council.
that.
Yeah, I think that's great.
and I think in mentioning the 750, I definitely think we should come back and look at that some more. Cause I feel like while we did address ingress egress, that is an option, that is something to consider.
Yeah, I'm, making an attempt to clean up the discussion on this because tonight, what's actually on the table.
No,
What's the ingress egress definition.
absolutely. It gets muddy quick.
Okay. I would encourage that. I think that this is worth discussing further. All right, we will move on to item 6, consider modifications to North Logan City Code, Title 6-504 procurement procedures. Alan, we've discussed this in the past. Can you kind of get us back up to speed?
Yeah, there's a few other edits in here. This is just looking at, again, this is kind of odd that it's in the city code, but it should be more of an employee governing employees and how they go about purchasing items. Regardless, this is in city code per state requirements. As you go through here, though, these are just things that we brought up. This was adopted several years ago, probably 20 years ago, and then updated shortly after that, about 10 years later. But what we were looking at is some of these thresholds. The state requires that we put in thresholds. It doesn't give us dollar amounts, but it gives thresholds as to what we need to require. And those are kind of protections for the city when they go out to purchase things, so the city doesn't end up with issues. But beforehand, they were very limiting. And to be honest, I don't know if we were following to the letter of the law. They were so prohibitive, I don't think that we could purchase it. So you're in a balancing act. You want them prohibitive to the point where the cities won't, the employees or anyone, they won't make mistakes with purchasing things and they won't do anything that they shouldn't with the city's funds. While at the same time, we can't limit them to the point where they can't even do their own jobs. And so that's that balancing line that you're looking at with those thresholds. And so looking at this, they were increased fairly substantially for each of the thresholds, but below a certain amount, you have to have a purchase order. Those have to be, you have to check with Scott, who's going to make sure that you have money in your budget in order to make that purchase. And then as it goes to above a 25,000, you're required to have 3 bids. And there's different methods for obtaining those bids. And then as you go above 50,000 on a purchase, and keep in mind, these are the major purchases. This is when we go out and purchase major things in the parks, major road projects, other things that we were doing throughout the city. A new city office, expansion of the Civic Center. You'll see this in the coming weeks. We've already done a portion of this. Those have to come before the city council, and you have to approve those and select the bid or approve the bid that has been recommended. or not approve it. And so those are some of the options. Sealing bid procedures. So anything above 50,000 is a sealed bid, meaning we have to solicit 3 sealed bids. We have to solicit them, document it, put it out on public notice, and go through that whole process. So then it goes through a lot of those things. Awarding the bid, we have to make caveats though in awarding the bid that we can't be forced to select the lowest bid. We should analyze it to see if we can select the lowest bid. But you never want to be stuck in that position, because I wasn't involved, but I came on at the tail end of a project that was selected. It was bidded. They selected the lowest bid by less than half of the other bids that were there. By the time all the change orders came in, that one road project ended up being more expensive than all the other bids that came in. And so we have to be very careful with those types of things. And the city needs the leeway to do a little bit more background check and a little bit more due diligence in selecting something. That's the crux of this, is really those thresholds, changing those thresholds, and just changing a few things as far as the sealed bids are concerned. Those are the major items of change.
And Ellen, when we're putting that threshold higher, we're still tracking those spending. So say someone buys something for
yeah.
24,000, we're still gonna see where that money goes. It just doesn't trigger special approval by the city council.
Correct. Special approval or different approvals. So like by myself or Scott, and then if it's below a threshold, there's no approval, but all of those are tracked to show exactly what has been spent. It's just the approval to make those purchases is what you're looking at.
So going to these different benchmarks, are they in agreement with our auditors, or are these going to get us hung up with the auditors later?
I don't think they'll get us hung up with the auditors. We brought this up about 2 years ago and we discussed it with them and went over some of the increases there. We've looked at some other cities and what they have, and some cities are pretty vague when you go through it. Others were around these numbers. We kind of just selected some of the points where we have, let's say we have to purchase salt for this. I mean, I go down with 2 or 3 trucks, purchase salt, bring it back. I mean, that has to be below a certain amount because we don't have to go out to bid to go and get salt. I mean, that's just a common sense. And then major truck repairs or other things on our dump trucks. And we have to keep that below a certain level, because if our threshold's 10,000, we have to go out to get 3 bids every time we want to repair a truck and get it back on the road to repair things. It's at a low point. At the same token, we don't want city staff or anyone going out and just purchasing things willy-nilly and not doing their due diligence to get things at a very good price. That's not being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. So that's your balancing act right there.
Okay. How's everyone feeling? Are we ready to make these modifications?
I'll make the motion that we approve these modifications to Title 6-504, the procurement procedures.
All right, motion by Craig. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Buzzy. All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And similar with Title 6-300 through 6-306, surplus property. Alan, go ahead and tell us about that.
Okay, the same situation here. When we go through this, we need to make sure that we're following our own code through this. In some of these areas, it wasn't very defined and it was somewhat vague. In a few areas, I tried to go through, look at a few other cities' policies, combine those with some state policies. This isn't a perfect ordinance. None of the ordinances that we put together are perfect, but we're trying to get better with where we are with some of these things. And so in declaring surplus property, basically there's certain limits and a lot of these come from state code, but anything that is valued above a $50, I tried to define property because in here it was just loosely defined. It didn't really say what property was. And I literally brought up the point of a Post-it note. And per this code right here, you can't throw away a Post-it note. So we need to make this a little bit better defined. What it says though is that property of the city that goes through these ordinances and goes through these provisions is ORS in this first chapter. It's something that's on our depreciation schedule that Scott tracks. Or it's simply above a $50 market value, or it's above 3% of the original purchase price. So things kind of just decay over time, they lose their values, but that's a very low threshold. I mean, it has to get below that. But then we talk about there had to be other caveats. So down in here, it talks about being able to sell it as scrap or recycled. In the past, we've done this. I don't think we fully abided by the ordinance. So when we have pipe or old manholes or other things that we need to get rid of, it has little to no value other than to be recycled. We need to be able to take that down, recycle it, and bring that money back to Debbie and put that in the appropriate account. And that's basically what we do now. We just need to make sure we have a policy that states that that's what we're doing. And so the other things that come into play are assessing those values, and it gives a caveat. It has to go before the city recorder. So we can't just go in and say, I think all these properties are at this value, and then just run out and sell them without the approval of the council. Well, there's a step in between. That has to go before Scott, and we look at the fair market value. You can look at that online. You could do other steps for smaller personal property type things. The other steps of the city council, sorry, the city attorney, when we were looking at this, again, this is the funny thing where we have to offer the property currently, if it's real property, you have to offer it back to the original owner.
That's crazy.
Which every time we've done this since I've been here, he laughed at that. We send a letter to the original home where we knew that they live and they never live in that home. And then they laugh and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I wonder
And
why that was there in the first place.
I don't know, some protections in there, and I have no ideas from the early 80s when they wrote that. Some of them make sense though, like you can't do it under threat of condemnation. You can't come in and condemn a property, get it, and then sell it. I mean, that's just sorry, I don't know what city would do that, but there's also other things where it says that you can't rezone it, but that's all actually a little bit over limiting, because if you sold the property, the city did, at some point in 50 years, I mean, the city needs to have that provision there to be able to rezone it to the appropriate zone. And we will see that as we go throughout the city, that there's certain areas that do need to be rezoned at some point, but again, it leaves that there. And then in the state code, it's very vague as to what an appraisal is. It doesn't say the type of appraisal. And so I looked at some other city code, tried to combine them and put a caveat there for how you determine the fair market value at that point. That doesn't determine how we sell it. Just, you really have to have an appraisal to give you a base point or a starting line for what the value of the property is. And so that was just a shot that I had of just trying to define, really, if you can't get an appraisal, what do we do at that point to define the initial value? It still has to go out to a sealed bid. It's out for procurement and our surplus properties at this point, where we have to go out, we have to advertise it. I think that was one of the other biggest things in here was just how we go out and we surplus properties, and we have to put them out to bid. Anyway.
So the only question I had, and this is probably really dumb, but you just put in here that the radius, if you can't, this is about appraising. And
Mhm.
you say if you can't find 3 within the initial half mile, you can be expanded to 1 mile. Is there any property that the city owns that we couldn't find a comparable property within a mile? I just wondered if we had assessed that at all.
No, I went through those.
The only
but
reason I'm
that's-
asking is I'm like, well, what if you can't find one in a mile? Sorry,
I
that,
did.
yeah, like, do we just keep going up? Like, yeah, sorry, maybe dumb question.
No,
but-
not at all. When I originally did this, I went out a half mile to look on the radius about several properties that we do own and if they went up for sale. And that's when I got nervous, because there were several that we may not be able to find another property that sold within a year or any other property. But then when I went out to a mile, it's 8 blocks. So you're getting to a point where you can go in a big wide area, and you should.
you're
be able to
confident that's
find
broad
at
enough.
least one comp
Okay.
within the
Okay,
last few years.
I trust you. I just wondered.
I think
It's
if
a
we
good
get in that
question.
pickle, we need to just come back before the city council and discuss this again. I mean, that's a real scenario where we may run
Okay.
into that.
Okay. All right. Scott, do you have anything to add? Okay. All right. Are we comfortable making a motion on this?
Oh, sorry, one other provision in there, if there is property in the past, the city talked about whether or not the employees would have first option for that. That became really sticky. There's some issues with that. It can get kind of shady. And so we nixed that out of the procurement procedures. And we basically just say, if the property can be used by another department within the city, it doesn't go through any process. It just goes between the department heads. They let Scott know it's transferred to the other department. They use it for public purposes. Then if it has no value after that, at a certain point, they go through the regular process of surplusing and disposal.
So if you had extra water shares somebody was delinquent on and it became city property, does that fit into this as well?
That could, it would go under personal property or something along those lines.
Okay.
I move that we approve the modifications to the North Logan City Code titles 6-300 through 6-306.
All right,
Second.
motion by Buzzy, second by Craig, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. All right, we will move into the work session items. The first one's updates on the Civic Center. Do you want to take that away, Alan? You want me to give it? I'll defer to you on this one,
Either way. if
and
you
I'll
just
add
wanna-
if you leave anything out.
We can go quickly on this item. I just wanted to update everyone. We went through the procurement procedures for an RFP for a contractor. That will come before the council at the next meeting. We did receive the proposals, but no, there hasn't been one selected yet. And so that may come before the next city council, the next meeting or the meeting after that. But just looking through here, just to give people an update. I mean, so if I circle this map up on the board, you are here. Sorry, my cursor is so big. And then looking at the remainder of this site, that's the police station. This would be where the new city office would go, and this is the community center and library expansion.
That council chamber is really small.
We'll put
Sorry.
your seat up really high,
Yeah.
Buzzy. It's fine. It
We'll
has,
look at that.
the city
Center for
offices have moved pretty significantly to the, can we have some order here? The city offices have moved pretty significantly to the east, just by way of update.
Joke.
Are we passing notes? Like,
No,
really?
he just made a really stupid joke.
So
I found
The
it
city
funny.
office, just in
They moved to
general,
the east
just so
side,
you're
so-
aware, has this layout. We toured about 5 other city offices. Spoke with even more. We talked about things they could do if they started over, kind of like our cemetery. When we started the cemetery, we went out to all the other cemeteries and asked if they could start over today, what would they do? And so we tried to capture those elements. The key area is the lobby. When someone comes in, having several different options for someone that comes into the lobby to get the information they need quickly, right there in the lobby. Not having open doors go out throughout the entire office, because in several other city offices in the valley, people just wander through the city office and show up in offices.
It's the people's-
It's not very good for security measures, but the just simple things like that. And then obviously to save taxpayer money, what we're looking at is really a probably 90% unfinished basement. And what that means is we'll have a few offices, probably public works centered in the basement with a meeting room, a lot of unfinished after that. And that'll be very useful for public works. They'll come in, they'll do a lot of meetings, plannings, everything taking place in the basement of the room. They haven't whined too much about being in partial dark. They'll have very nice windows on the back side of this, but that's one of the things that we've talked about. And then over time, we've done this in the past. The city can actually build walls and do certain things at kind of a fraction of the cost of what we would do building the entire building at once. And so it
So the
really
basement,
does-
oh, sorry, Alan. So the basement, are those offices actually going to be complete in the basement then on the outside corridor?
Yes, these
Oh,
are
nice.
west facing windows. And maybe I can find.
That's
the-
elevate below elevation, right? Isn't that on retention or something?
Let me
there.
see if this is, okay. So that's the front of the office facing east. It'll probably be modified slightly from that.
That's not facing east, right?
Yeah.
This top
Oh.
one,
But we're standing facing.
sorry, we're looking at
West.
the east side of the
Okay.
building. Yes, Mayor, you are correct. Now we are looking east at the west side of the building.
There we
And so Buzzy, these windows
Okay.
right here would be the offices. If you can see my cursor.
Yep.
Those are those offices discussed along with the meeting room, like a council room. And so as you look through there, these would be very nice offices. What we're looking at is really planning for the future, and the future with the city office. I mean, it's changed several times in staffing since I've been here.
Yeah.
Considerably. It's kind of bounced back and forth in different directions as to what staff we have and what we're doing. I think COVID threw that for a loop for a year, and now we don't even know what the heck's going on for the future. But we're trying to anticipate all the future needs and have that flexibility to meet whatever that is in the future.
Yeah.
The only one comment I have is, and when you say basement, I mean, I know at certain height, you don't have to have an elevator, but I remember touring Smithfield City's fire department. They put this basement, and then all of a sudden with ADA, and all that stuff that comes in. Is there elevator access to that? Because all of a sudden
Yeah.
you get an employee that you're
Maybe-
accommodating, then you're in trouble. And that's the problem with their place there. They have this place where they do lift weights and it looks wasted to me. I
It'd be
mean,
fully ADA compliant from the beginning.
The elevators.
so
that
there
big
is an
X,
elevator that goes
right?
down.
That
to-
big
True.
X
An
right
elevator.
there.
Yeah, okay. That's the only thing I'm sure that was brought in, but I just remember them commenting that, yeah, this is nice, but then all of a sudden they're running into when we were doing our police day.
Mhm. Those are a lot of the major updates. I mean, it's exciting what's taking place. I mean, the good aspect is we'll probably do some fundraising shortly, combining some of the city's funds that we've saved for this, library funds that have been saved for this, along with the major donations. And I mean, the goal and intent is to not have any type of property tax increase or other city funds that would go towards this building.
Yeah.
It'd be very rare to have a building like this and the other buildings that are quasi debt free for the city.
Yeah. It's
really
it's really
excited.
This is
impressive.
gonna be awesome.
Do you have a budget for what this is proposed?
Mhm. Yeah, and the CIB
Did I miss
budget, we
that?
went over that. I can go over that with you. It's
Okay.
pretty lengthy, the budget and how it works and what funding sources go to each separate area. Rightfully, you're looking probably about 10 million between all the different projects.
Still looking at spring maybe to dig, start the.
This spring, we'll probably have a groundbreaking ceremony and we'll probably
Ooh.
hopefully get
Are we
to
There
that.
will
What
be
a
a
cool
dig.
mayor thing.
We'll get some gold spray painted shovels. So when we get to that point though, keep in mind, the thing that's difficult right now, and we're getting into that point where we'll sit down and have the very difficult talks and trying to get with the contractor to save money on options for materials. But what we're hearing is the difficulty in acquiring steel, large wood trusses. They can even be 12 to 14 months out right now. So that's the difficult aspect. I mean, we could dig, we could pour, we could have a lot of things ready, but if we're waiting 12 months for steel trusses, that's going to be very difficult.
Yep. We're
So-
kind of at the mercy of the market, I think, like everyone else.
Crazy.
Yeah, I'm encouraged by it. It's been a fun process and it's been moving along really well so far. So,
Cool.
okay. Reports from city officers, boards and committees. I always bungle this. Who do we start with? Chief Black, come on down.
Oh, yeah.
It was nice to hear the fire department was not the favorite tonight because of the limitations roads cause for their access. But joking. Real quick. An update for personnel, Nolan Krebs, our animal control. He's been with us about 12 years, just shy of 12 years. He announced his retirement yesterday, so he'll be done at the end of the month, February 28th. And so Jason Morgado has been helping to fill in because recently Officer Krebs had to have a knee surgery. So I had somebody in place to help us with that. And so he accepted that job to come full-time starting March 1st. So.
Okay,
we
so
have
that'll
that
be
filled.
pretty
So-
seamless.
And yes, and that was a blessing to be
Yeah.
able to do that. Because animal control is not the easiest thing to understand, so. Call volume from January 16th to January 29th, 204 calls of service and 108 traffic contacts. There's been some issues with how our crossing guards have been treated at some of the intersections. Some of that has been publicized in the social media lately. I know that we spoke about that earlier. Councilwoman Emily and I spoke a little bit. There is some things I'm looking at as far as putting body cameras on our crossing guards to help capture these things. It is something that we have a grant already funded that we can maybe look at to purchase those through. The money would be qualified under that to use it for that item. So that's something we're exploring. We understand that this is an issue. It's not an easy one to resolve. Even the crossing guards, they don't always get the information. They understand we have to have certain things in order to follow up with those types of activities that occur or incidents that occur. We did actually have an officer there running traffic control or watching the intersection, saw that there was a conversation in their viewpoint from where they were. They couldn't hear anything, didn't see exactly what was going on. And it wasn't until after the fact that we became aware of what was actually taking place. So
So I saw that on social media. Was that just a single incident, or are you saying there's been more than just the one?
there seems to be more and more incidents of
People are not very
people-
nice to them.
And is
Oh,
that,
they're
is that
very
for
bad.
only at Greenville, or has that
Yeah.
also been at North Park?
We've had other areas as well. We've had it up at North Park Elementary. We've had it at 2508 East. But our majority of the problems that we're seeing are here at 2504 East.
Oh,
Okay.
they get so abusive in their language to them, and it is
And
not.
are they
appropriate in any way,
consistently,
shape, or
is it the
form.
same offenders, or it's
No
just
problem.
multiple people?
Yes, not
It's
same
more-
offenders.
it's-
It just seems like it's becoming a more regular occurrence where
Whew.
people are impatient.
People are
and-
very impatient at that intersection.
Can we throw the book at them? Is there some strict consequences for people that are, you know?
Me yelling
mean-
at them right now is the strictest one that they get, and I'm not kidding.
No,
That's
but
probably
really,
pretty
what
though.
are the
Oh, it's not
options?
great.
Like-
Generally, I have a baby strapped to my back, so I
So-
look real great. But I do wonder though, if more education, because I don't think people know what information they need. So is there a way we could put out, if you see an incident that is inappropriate, here's the information you should take down, and here's who you should report it to? Because the person who wrote the original Facebook post said, they didn't get information. I just wonder if maybe we could potentially put that out there. Is that an option?
We can absolutely educate people on what things are needed in order for us
Yeah.
to do any kind of enforcement action at a later time.
Mhm.
And again, if we're not present, it takes that person that witnesses the offense to be the complainant in a situation, and they sign on the line as well as the defendant or the person being accused. And then when they go to court, if it goes to court, the person that witnessed the event would actually be the one to testify as to what occurred. We act as the middle person. A lot of times these go through our prosecutor before any kind of summons is issued for an event that we didn't see in person. So.
Because I would be happy to post it everywhere. And the other issue is I think a lot of people assume that there is a lot of ill intent, that they're trying to make your day as hard as possible, when in reality, I think just the reminder that they're there to keep your children and my children safely crossing the street. I just think any more reminders we have of that would never go amiss. I mean, I'll repost it as many times as you post it. So
These people driving by
I know, yeah, it's
they're
Driving.
driving.
They're driving.
Yes,
Road rage.
It's like,
yes.
Have we ever had this problem before? I mean,
There's always been issues that we've had in years past with, it seems though people have become more impatient. So.
they're definitely more willing to yell at the crossing guards.
So who posted the social media
It was a
post?
private citizen.
But it was the offender.
No, it was.
It was
witness.
the,
It was a witness to it.
not the crossing guard.
And the
Oh.
witness, the person who posted was saying, this happened. Does anyone know who the crossing guard was? And
Got
like, there were comments of people, because I got tagged in it, because I walk my children to school every day and I know
Right.
him, he's a great guy. But they were like, Emily, did you see anything? And I saw the tail end of it. So I didn't even realize how bad it was. But
So we are looking at this. I just wanted to make council aware that we're
Okay.
very aware that there are issues going on. We do assign officers whenever they know that if they're not busy on something else, especially during crosswalk times when schools, either beginning or ending.
And is morning or afternoon, which tend to be, there's
It's-
not,
There's not
Uh,
a time that's
okay.
better than the other.
Yeah, however we can support you, I think
Okay.
we'd be behind
But
that.
there's some steps we're trying to take and there's things
Thank
we're
you so
looking at.
much. I
trying to
appreciate that
address
so much.
Because it is hard for the things that are required. There's identity of the person driving,
Mhm.
the car, plate, those kind of things, descriptors that we can go on and identify who would have been there at that time and involved in the incident. So
Okay,
without that, we don't have enough to go forward with a case if we don't witness it. So,
okay.
but the body cameras, if that's something we can actually do, may help us in at least capturing those events. So.
And maybe we could even say as a city council, how much we support the crossing guards. Just want them to know how supported they are. I think that they get more flack than they get support. So anything we can do.
That's absolutely something that any of us could do.
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Or
you.
you guys can come and be a crossing guard if you want.
Absolutely not.
No. Thanks, guys.
They're probably from out of town.
I just had to take my opportunity. We rarely follow the police department, so. Just a couple things. We have a couple vacancies we had a recent retirement of a 21-year veteran. So we're in our, it's going through the process. Winter time is really difficult for us to put on a test. So we're going to do an internal with our part-timers. We're hoping to get that together and get a couple people hired by the end of the month. So that's all we really have. Just troublesome of what we're dealing with what COVID has created. We just purchased 2 new ambulances and we got a 17-month delivery date. So,
wow.
yeah, it's kind of unbelievable that we're that far out, but you know, that's the world we live in today. So that's all I have.
What is the position, sorry, that you're trying to fill?
We have 2 firefighter, AMT paramedic slots. We take either or. But we usually do an annual test, open hire test annually. But we do have part-timers that we could convert to full-time as part of that process. So it's a little different. It's a little more time saving and a little less legwork for us to hire internally. We do have some good part-time candidates that we're looking at pretty seriously. We just have to do still some of those agility and medical scenario type testing we still have to do. So we're going to run through that this next week. And, you know, as long as that all goes well, then we probably won't do a true open hire recruitment until this spring.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Spencer? Hopefully we can solve this issue with the future city council room.
Just one quick follow-up item from my update last week. Workshop with the planning commission. I did speak with the planning commission last meeting, and we discussed a couple things. How many times they'd like to have a workshop, how many times we think is feasible, and when those would occur. And I just wanted to touch base and get back to them. So the 2 trains of thoughts were 3. We talked 3 in the past. I think we've only ever gotten probably 2 realistically. I think we've shot for 4 or 3 and only gotten through. The planning commission seemed to lean in favor of doing it just biannually, just shooting for 2, so that we don't take up too many meeting spaces. Along with that, if we're looking for, and they were open, if the city council wants to meet 3 times, they're not going to refuse you. So they're not going to turn a cold shoulder. So basically what we're looking at timing wise, if we want to do 2 times and meet 2 times this year, this February meeting schedule is getting pretty busy, which typically happens as we get closer to spring. We want to get developments through so they can build. So we have busy agendas, and it's looking like that's going to be the case. If we met 2 times, I'd vote to probably not do this month. Next month for the 2nd week, which seems to be is preferable because of police commission. I'm actually going to be out at a conference in March, so that would leave April. And then if we go 6 months from there, that puts us at October. So if we did biannually, we could do 1 in April, 1 the 2nd meeting in October. Alternately, if we wanted to do 3, we probably would need to get a workshop in, and that would mean 2 weeks from now we have a workshop. Do it in February, and we do February, June, and October, or we could do the first meeting in March and do a March, July, November kind of track. So those are the options. Planning commission seem to lean towards 2 times a year.
Not to
Just
throw
for
a
reference.
wrench in your operations.
Okay.
Something to throw you for a loop. For the remaining meetings until the first meeting in May, we'll have budget presentations. And there'll be 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 per city council meeting. And there's 1 meeting canceled in April already. The 2nd meeting in April would be canceled. However, your first meeting in May, you have to have a tentative budget approval. And then after that, you don't have any budget presentations, or that first meeting in May, you just have the tentative budget as a whole for approval. And then after that, it's just public hearings, a few other budget approvals, but it's not 3 or 4 presentations per city council. So you had the 3 or 4 presentations plus developments, ordinance changes, other items on the agenda. It can be pretty busy in the
Yes.
spring.
So we could do May, and there's nothing says we have to space them 6 months apart. That's just my own organization brain kicking in. So if we could do one in May and one in November or October, if we wanted to do them just 2 times a year, that may be honestly more feasible than trying to push for 3.
We rotate nights too, right? So the first one in April could be on planning commission night
True.
instead of city council night.
It's just setting up the city council to come to city council and then come back the next day
I've
after a
been doing
potentially
it,
long agenda.
And it's really fun.
Emily-
So you should definitely
Emily's
come.
there for it.
It is a party.
I mean, I would like to get
It's
that
gonna be
first
fun.
one in to kind of just see where we are. We really do need to get what's happening here.
Don't forget you have commission.
We
Oh, yeah.
we are aware.
Roger's got.
That's the first Thursday, right? Okay. I'm in favor of getting one in before too long, just because, we have a lot of changes and I really do want to start talking in earnest about our long-term plans. I don't want to bump that too long.
I would be
I think
really,
May works. That's fine with me. And I think maybe we kind of leave it open that I want to keep that momentum too. I think that was kind of a drawback of some of the previous ones we've had is that, you talk broad level and then what? You almost have to have some follow-up that's not 6 months down the road. So I would almost say, let's do a May one and then let's make a decision about the remainder of the year, kind of see how far we get on that. Tentatively say May, October.
Okay.
And then if we need to do
Potentially in
something in the
August.
middle, then we schedule it.
Okay.
Does that work?
I like it.
Does that
can
work
make
for
it.
you?
Yes, and I'll
Okay.
pass that along to the planning commission.
My
Okay.
birthday's May 8th, so not May 8th.
May 8th it
Bring
is.
cake.
I'm sorry. We could make
day
it
of
a
the week
party.
Is that we'll make.
What
it
do you do on your birthday though? Like after I turn 20, it's just a regular day.
I mean, maybe
We
not.
want
add an extra
answers,
board.
Roger. What do you do on your birthday? And we would like an invite.
Yeah, how do we get included?
Jordan, do you have anything?
When's your birthday?
Yeah,
Jordan?
what do you do on your birthday every year? Okay. All right. Are we just going around, Marie? Scott? The message for March. What's the deadline? Roger, what's your wife doing this week?
On his birthday.
She could do it again.
Okay,
was
no,
good.
I'll get it.
That was a good message, Roger.
It was very great. Okay.
Uplifting.
All right, Alan. Okay. All right. Then we will move to executive session. Can we take a 2-minute break?
Yes.
Oh, so to adjourn. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
No.
adjourn.
Wait.
No,
Oh.
we need a motion. We need a motion to
Sorry.
move into executive session.
Oh,
Excuse me.
can you do that, Emily?
Sure. Yeah, I just feel like this is so dumb for me and so hard. Motion to adjourn city council to go to an executive session with a 2-minute recess.
Denied.
Thank you.
We're not adjourning though, right?
No.
So we're motioning to
Sorry.
move into
Sorry,
executive
motion to
session.
move to an executive session with
Okay.
a 2-minute recess.
Second.
Okay, motion by Emily, second by Buzzy in advance. All in favor?
Aye.